these bodies that we have, and I know this as a dancer, but just as a human being, there are vehicles for navigating relationship, for health. And if we can't be in our bodies, if we don't continue to learn how to do that, we won't have our bodies anymore.
Our ever-changing world calls upon the most courageous, resilient, and relentless of us to face its most extraordinary challenges. To help you embark on this journey, we present the Impactful Coaching Podcast, your oasis for inspiration and a beacon to spark the fires of greatness within you. I'm Joseph. I will be your ally in this journey to empower your potential. Join us each week as we dive deep into the heart of ambition, drive, and success to unravel compelling stories of daring leaders who dreamed, struggled, and achieved victory. Our journey begins now. It's funny how my lighting actually looks worse with the smaller image as opposed to blowing up. How is everybody doing? This is the Impactful Coaching Podcast. My name is Joseph, and as I say, I probably missed an episode or two, but let the intention be known that it is an honor and a privilege to be able to conduct this program, learn what I can learn, share what I can share, and do the best I can to connect coaches to other coaches, connect coaches to those who are in most need of the service, and just show how important this work is, because one theme that has been resonating in my mind over the last 6 or 7 episodes is that as technology continues to improve and the pace at which it improves becomes more rapid, we're going to need a lot of innovation on the personal sector in order to keep up. And so for me, it's great to be able to do my part and get the message out there. I'm here today with Michelle Boulé. Michelle, how are you doing today? How are you feeling?
Doing great. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being on the program. So I always do my best to prepare for the episode, learn what I can learn about the guest prior to. And I have seen that you've had a fair share of podcast experiences under your belt. Some people, this is the first time they've been on the program. Some people have been on the podcast circuit for some time. So I'm going to do my best to bring something unique to the table, just not only for you, but for your audience as well, who may be listening to this episode. Coming in, everybody. But then also just because that's just what I personally enjoy doing. So that said, the first part of this, unfortunately, is very much a podcast staple. So would you care to share with the audience what you do and what you bring to the coaching world?
Yeah, I am a dancer, maybe first and foremost, but I also feel like we're in a time where people are very multiple in who they are. But that's my background. I started dancing over 40 years ago and still do. And I experienced pretty significant injuries when I was 16 years old, maybe for like surgery on my feet when I was 13. 16 years old, I had to quit dancing and I thought I was done. And essentially, the long story short is that that led me on a path of holistic healing, holistic perspective of the body, somatic work. This is in the late 90s. And just all these different modalities to broaden the picture of what actually helps us function at our best. So for me, it was I wanted to be able to dance more. I wanted to be available for movement. And the more holistic approaches versus like, okay, your ankle's really not working well. Let's work on your ankle. It was no, we're going to work on your spine. We're going to work on your breath. And that resolved the issue that was showing up. So that happened. And then as I moved to New York, I have had a professional career there. I lived there for 21 years, danced all over the world. And as I continued to dance and ask more of myself, there were other facets that needed to come into my awareness to continue to be successful. And like after the physical, holistic approach, the mental and the emotional holistic approach came in. I was experiencing back pain, and the practitioner I was working with directed me towards my anger. We had to work on my anger. This is in my early 20s. And that had a direct correlation to my physicality. So that started, the mental health piece started. And then consciousness and spirituality has always been there, but is really at the forefront for me now. And even prior to that, really looking at prosperity, which is a big concern for people. Especially, I work with a lot of artists and creative people, and money's not the first thing on their minds, but it is a means. Well, I don't even want to call it a means to an end. That's such a I really love that statement. It's another place of movement. And that I could say has been a theme for me. Like, my body couldn't move in my teens in the way that I wanted it to anymore because I was injured. My emotional state, my relationships couldn't move. And then my finances weren't moving in the way that I wanted. So all of this has kind of grown and built into who I am and what I'm interested in. And I think I have also always just naturally wanted to share and teach and help others in their journeys as well.
Quite the answer. Definitely gave me a number of things that I wanted to unpack,
Yeah.
and I appreciate it. Now, I myself, I fall into the arts and the media category, and at the place that I am now, I realized that if I were asked the question that I had asked you, my answer in place of dancing would be writing. And
Mhm.
the thing that really made that a lock for me, even though I had received feedback throughout my life and I definitely gotten some accolades out of it. I was one of the top writers in my college class. None of that really worked for me until I actually sat down and started working on a book and realized how much I enjoyed it. So much so that I enjoyed it more than like the games that I'm addicted to, more than my favorite TV shows. On and on. Just enjoyed it more than anything, to the point now where there's almost like a depression that sets in if I go too long without continuing to work on my material. So
Mm.
that part is sort of the parallel that I hear in my mind, to the point now where I say like I am born with a writer's brain. I see the
Mm.
world through a writer's mind, and
Mm.
I'm curious if any of that sentiment is help it works for you too. If you take your mindset as a dancer and apply it to, I don't know, grocery shopping, or apply it to working out your fiscal budget. Like, are there times where you feel like, if you agree, which you don't have, like maybe you disagree, but if you find your dancer's mind has served you in ways that you weren't expecting?
Well, I would definitely say, I mean, it's great to be talking to a fellow creative because I feel like there is a way that our brains work that I feel like everyone has access to. But for me, it's like I'm not great with left brain, like plan it out. Contrary to what you told me before we started chatting, I'm a total improviser. It's like in the moment, in the moment. But to go back to your question, hearing you say you see the world through writing, I feel like I see the world through movement. And not only that, more so than dancing. So there's movement, which is just it's something we experience because we're moving all day long in these physical bodies until the day we are no longer
Mm-hmm.
alive. So that movement piece is huge for me. And I just knew as a dancer, if some part was stuck, my whole system was compromised. And it might not like my ankle stuff, it was like that was where the injury showed up, but it was the result of so many other things that weren't fully integrated. So movement is one piece and creativity is the other piece. And I think creativity lets us be in these spaces of expansion, of wonder, of you used the word pleasure, which just delighted me too, because our educational system is not really about pleasure. It's about get this done, get the right grade, do it according to this set of rules. And then you get to move on to the next thing. And there's competition built into it, which competition is a healthy thing too, but it's not always healthy. Like everything has a light and a
Mm-hmm.
shadow. And I think creativity just gives us this space to access a part of ourselves where solutions come in, where our body relaxes, where we start to heal. Like literally, I don't have a professional visual art career, but I am doing, I draw maybe almost every day, and it's just a simple sketch. And now I just picked up some paint and I started putting that on this. I completed one book of drawings and now I just put this paint on this sketch pad and it's just sitting there on my counter and I look at it and I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to do the next thing to
Mm-hmm.
it. And dance isn't always that either because I think when we're in our craft and we're in it professionally, all these pressures come in. It can turn into a different thing. But I think when we really find that heart of creativity, I believe we connect to something that is very childlike in the best of ways, and also something that is very of the nature of what this universe is. Like there's a deep connection in creativity.
I want to agree with you on the school system, but I need to temper my reaction because this could turn into an hour-long rant about my dissatisfaction with the educational system. And I do occasionally think back to a lot of the positive teachers and a lot of the positive influences that I had. There were some excellent teachers that I had met while I was a student, and then I had the privilege to talk to throughout my media career. So credit where it's due. Some people really are trying to make the best of a difficult system. But not only did school not exactly reward my creative output, it often punished me for it. It would teachers would pull the comics that I was working on at the time out from under my hands and rip it up and put it in the garbage because apparently what they had to talk to me about was more important, or even just like downtime where I'm just minding my own business. Teachers would rip it out, and there's tact that I feel was lacking at the time. It'd be one thing for a teacher to say, Joseph, I see you enjoy this and you've obviously got a talent for it, but this is not the time for this. This is something that you're going to have to do either on free time or at home. We are trying to, make sure you're prepared for the next grade, prepared for the next thing. I could buy that. Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. But I almost have to thank them for what they did instead, which is to put that chip on my shoulders and make what I was doing seem even less valuable and less relevant than whatever it is that they wanted to share with me instead. 8 years of elementary school, and like I still count with my fingers. The only thing I remember really picking up in school was learning how to sew. So rant over.
I think what you're sharing happens to people in so many different places and spaces, which this is related to this movement piece I was talking to. It's expression,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if you noticed, like I tear up. I feel what you were sharing, and I think one of the biggest motivators for me is that people get to be who they are because I know the pain of not being able to express myself in that way, or know who I am. And it's a lifelong process. It will always be. So I just want to put my heart out to that young part of you and anyone who knows this feeling as well. It's painful. And I think there's a beautiful journey that we all take in overcoming that will just continue to serve our human evolution at large. That's what I want to believe. So I couldn't not say anything in response to your story.
I'm going to show you something real quick. Just take a
Okay.
second. So I did manage to smuggle out some contraband from elementary school. So this is
Nice.
a scrapbook. I think I was supposed to use this for French class or something like that. And so these were the drawings. I know the lighting is really bad.
Oh my
All I
gosh,
have to
I
say is
love
the
it.
drawings are not very good, but that's okay.
But it's expression again. I love it.
And the story and the characters that I put into this book are the same characters that exist in the story that I'm creating right now. So that's like 25 years, 30 years of getting to know them inside my head and
Mm.
seeing how my growth has changed my ability to see their point of view. And the reason why it's coalescing now, which didn't occur to me until like 150 pages in, is that I am now writing them at the age I depicted them at when I first created them. Because I didn't create 8-year-olds. Who wants to story about 8-year-olds? Well, some people do, but whatever. But because they were in their like late 20s, early 30s, now I'm like, okay, now I know what it's actually like to live that. So now I can write about that. So
Mm.
that's my takeaway from it. That's sort of the relic or the artifact that reminds me how I don't, for better or for worse, I don't let my past go, because I feel like doing that would, sure, it would eliminate some of the pain, but it would eliminate a lot of the joy and a lot of that early discovery that has been so important to where I'm going now. And I'll open the floor to give you a reaction. But the other thing that I just wanted to say to add into all of this too is that early on that you had said that a lot of us feel like we have to wear multiple hats, and that is something that pretty much every artist has to contend with in some way, shape, or form. And right now, I'm kind of trying not to do that. I'm really trying to like narrow down and focus on the key things that are most important to me, which is basically writing. And that's where actually some of the resentment had built up in my life's experience, especially in my 20s, feeling like I never got to prove myself as a writer or
Mm,
as a creative, and always having to do something else to maybe open the door for an opportunity to prove myself as a writer.
yeah.
Unfortunately, we live in a world now where it's very easy for us to self-market, build our platforms from scratch, generate an audience, and just subvert whatever system has been holding us back, whether physically or otherwise. The floor is now open.
Okay. Well, it's interesting as I'm
Over.
listening to you. Um, One of my biggest things that I work on with people who want to do this work is that is really seeing we've all done that. We've all learned to see ourselves as victims in certain situations. And that like in this spirit of creation that we're talking about, like I really do believe, yes, we have experiences in our lives. We may not have consciously chosen them, but I think on some soul level, we signed a contract perhaps, and yeah, we did choose this, maybe to learn the lesson. So I guess my response is like the only thing that is holding us back ever is ourselves. And I think that is the deepest, deepest work. And maybe, as a kid, if you were told this, maybe even before you could consciously even process what was happening, you were told your art, your expression wasn't worth the time, you will subconsciously recreate that experience until you, or a person will, you, a person, until there's a moment where like some conflict comes to a head or there's a burst of something that wants to come through to let that pattern shift. So I guess that was the one thing that came from that. It's like, okay, there's also a timing, there with creativity, with anything, there's a gestation period. That is one of the universal laws. Like things take time. They're not necessarily instant. They may seem like that, but something may have been gestating for a long time in your lifetime or in someone else's lifetime. It's just, I was talking to a friend about this today at lunch. It was like talking about older generations, and we can't expect older generations to have maybe the consciousness that we have. The pervasiveness of a more holistic way of thinking and being culturally now is not what my parents had. We continue to have more access, I think, to different ways of being, and it helps each generation go through that process of hopefully, ideally, supporting more creation and more life. That was a lot of different things in there, but
what what
my reaction.
what I'd like to ask in relation to that, whether or
Mhm.
not this is a concern of yours or if it's not a concern and you see it as an area of opportunity, because I think the reason why our generation has such a particular and specific wisdom is because we got to see the end of one era and the beginning of a new era, and that would be the era of the internet and the global exchange of information. And as I say this now, 02, 22, 2024, is that the next era is not only is it around the corner, but someone attached like hypersonic rockets to it. It can't come fast enough. And I speak to the AI era and how that
Mhm.
is already met with a lot of resistance, but is also met with a lot of excitement.
Mhm.
And what I said at the beginning of the episode about the rapidity of innovation, do you feel like there's going to be a struggle to maintain that holistic nature? Do you feel like we could end up
Oh,
getting way too wrapped up in our machines that we're going to lose our spiritual self? And if so, what do we do?
I think there already is.
Mm-hmm.
One of my so I'm hearing multiple parts of your questions, but I'll say this. I think this was, gosh, I don't know there's a woman whose work I studied. She's no longer alive, named Marion Woodman, and
Mm-hmm.
she was a Jungian analyst, so of Carl Jung's lineage, and writer. And there's a documentary on her called Dancing in the Flames, I believe, or With the Flames. And she says this, I'm trying to remember the year of that documentary, and I feel like it was before smartphones. She says that we live in a culture of addiction, and it can be addiction to technology. It can be food, drinking, shopping, work, sex, whatever it is. Um, and and there's a moment in that documentary where she talks about we've lost our relationship to ritual and to spirit. And I feel like, we're already in this age where kids are even interacting with each other less. There's less face to face. There's less of this space for empathy. And again, I do believe that everything has a shadow and a light. Like there's a gift in whatever we may seem as or perceive as dark. But I just feel like this ability to feel connected is what saves us in so many different ways. And it's interesting. I made a solo in 2017. It was an evening length dance solo that I performed. And it was one of my initial points of research was like, wow, it's interesting that it feels like so this is 2015, 16 when I started doing research for this. It just feels like we're in this like loneliness, like not being, and this has been going on forever, but we like not always feeling like we can be accepted as who we are. It's related to your story as a kid too, but so there's this like loneliness and this solitude, but at the same time, deep spiritual experience can often come out of moments of solitude. Like monks will retreat and be alone. It happens in community too, but I'm just kind of like dancing around with your question in that I also believe there's an underlying thing in operation here of more life. And we may destroy ourselves. I don't know. That is one line of thinking, and the media would certainly want us to believe that. I just realized we're getting real like metaphysical and esoteric here.
I'm not
This
stopping
is about
it.
coaching. Like the media would want us to believe that, it's there are so many people who are bringing innovation in. It's like, even I just remember it might have been even something like the New York Times where we'd be getting all these headlines over the years of like the world is going to end because of environmental problems. And then there's a headline that's like scientists are figuring out the environmental problems faster than we realized. It's like we get a lot of information over there. And I think one of the biggest things that is helpful for people, and this is what I bring in my coaching, is like, where are you right now? Can you feel you? Can you be in this body? I mean, what's fascinating, I've never put it together like this, but these bodies that we have, and I know this as a dancer, but just as a human being, there are vehicles for navigating relationship, for health. And if we can't be in our bodies, if we don't continue to learn how to do that, we won't have our bodies anymore. I mean, that could be a whole other direction, but like maybe that is our extinction. So I just feel like there's something about in our culture now too, like having safe spaces to feel what we're feeling in connection with people, to express creatively who we are, the range of expression that this world wants, that a healthy ecosystem requires. It requires biodiversity, but we don't, but humans get threatened. So that was a gazillion things. I'm going to pause right there for your reflection and direction.
So this was something that I had written down prior to that I was expecting to ask, and now is the time to do it. So and it ties into what we're describing about the really the difficulty of having that presence and being able to express ourselves. So in high school you get your prom at the end, but then every year you get to do a semi-formal, which is like, I don't know, like a warm-up prom or whatever. And I only gone 1 year out of the four, and I don't recall up until that point basically dancing ever. It just wasn't my jam. But I said, you know what, I'm here. I use my parents' money for it, and I make the most of it. So I did a little bit of dancing, and what happens the next day is getting mocked for it. Like, Joseph can't dance, and then going onto Facebook and seeing like photo memories of it, and saying, well, Joseph can't dance, but the rest of it was a good night. And I took it in stride because uh, you know, I I dish it out a lot in high school, so I understand. Well, what a lot of people are probably just getting back at me, but I feel like the older that I get and the more I'm valuing my time, valuing my expertise, the less patience I have for something like that, because I find that kind of behavior is very similar to drug abuse. It's something that feels really good to say and do in the moment, but it leads to long term consequences. And that's unfortunate, because there is an opportunity for people to make themselves vulnerable and let themselves out. And I think the fear now is not being able to fully grasp what the consequences are. Anybody can just video it,
Yeah.
and then upload it to like 6 different platforms. And next thing I know, I'm getting like dance lessons as part of my advertising algorithm the next day. So it's just hard, I think, for a lot of people to want to get out there and do something, because we are no longer able to really quantify the cost benefit analysis for it.
Well, here's an interesting thing is that's a frequency of existence. That's a vibration. And I know I snuck in the word universal law earlier, but these are the universal laws. It's just their underlying substructure of how this universe operates. Everything is a vibration. An emotion is a vibration. And we live our lives. It's just like, a musical scale, or I have this little pan drum in my home that I got as a gift. And I'll move something and I'll hear that drum resonate when it's hitting the same key or note or whatever. So it's the same thing with our human existence. If we're in the frequency of sadness, or depression, maybe say that,
Yeah.
because that, like, sad, we all get sad. It's healthy. I mean, none of it is good or bad, right or wrong, is my perspective. But when we're in that frequency, we will continue to attract things in that frequency. It's hard to even see beyond that frequency. So, some part, like, if a person is criticized, like someone says to me, "Oh my God, Michelle, you are such a dumb blonde." And I'd be like, "Wait, I don't have blonde hair." Like, my dad had blonde hair, but or just something like, I hate your blonde hair or whatever. I'd be like, "Wait, what?" Like, I don't have blonde hair. And so it's the same thing with, like, "Oh my God, you're an awful dancer." It's like, well, my worth has nothing to do with that. So that's their opinion. But I think it's like, if we don't aren't taught like this ability to see that we are more than what we do. And this is really incredible for coaching too, because we're raised in this culture where our worth is placed on what we produce. It has nothing to do with that. Our value is placed on how we look. It has nothing to do with that. And they're all like, what happens is there's frequencies of fear,
Hmm.
right? Or even just in how we're raised, it's natural. We become afraid of losing love before we can speak. We develop habits around that. And I think ultimately in life, if we can build a practice and be in spaces and around people who remind us that your ability to receive anything in life, love as the first and foremost thing, has nothing to do with anything that you put out in the world or do or don't do. So, like that, I feel like it's almost like we could try to correct the problem, just like we could have tried to correct my ankle when I was 16 and it hurt to walk. The doctors tried to correct my ankle. It didn't do anything. Orthotics, PT exercises, that was not the issue. I needed a bigger perspective physically in my body, and then I needed a bigger perspective in all the realms of being. So that's my 2 cents on that. I just feel like, yes, cancel culture is strong, and I sympathize with that because I didn't grow up with that, but I've definitely had students who, it's like it can happen that fast. I also think we're riding a wave, I hopefully out of it. Like, some kids aren't even on social media. But I just feel like the antidote for me is to help people see that here's the words, as cheesy as they sound, but this is how they're coming through. Love is all there is. Seeing the world through that lens has us make very different choices. It has us open up to parts inside of ourselves that may have been closed for our entire lifetimes and for the lifetimes of the generations prior to us. So that's the long haul journey, I think, of these problems that will continue to arise for as long as humanity exists. And hopefully we just keep getting a little bit better, the longer we're able to be on this planet.
I can't say that there's been any tears generated, but what you said, despite the inherent cheesiness to it, is still resonant. I almost felt like this like positive, almost shockwave go through my system, as almost like everything just kind of like it's like seeing a picture, just kind of like just reframed a little bit like that. So it just goes to show that even speaking to the power and not even adopting the power is still well, powerful.
Hmm.
What I wanted to do, because we mentioned universal laws a couple of times, and this is something that I personally, I if somebody asks me what are the universal laws, I love. So I there's probably more to it than that. But one thing that I value about myself personally is that I'm very much like a fundamentals person. I do have a long legacy of playing games competitively, and my strength has always relied in understanding what are the fundamental principles of something, which then allow us to think creatively on the spot. So that's how I'm going to try to understand it. But what's how do we do this? Is this can be cliff noted? Can it be summarized? Like, what are the
Yeah.
universal laws that resonate with you?
Well, if a person were to do an online search for them, they'd probably come up with, lots of different responses. There's seven, there's 21, these are the laws. So they're organized in different ways, but it is what you're saying. It's just the fundamental way this world operates. And in someone who I mentored with for 2 years, these were huge in how he taught. And his goal was in helping us learn how to think, because in school we're not necessarily taught how to think, we're taught how to repeat.
Yeah.
So these laws are great ways to learn how to think. And I imagine I'm going to give you one of, I learned seven fundamental ones, and then there's all these subsidiary laws. Is the law of cause and effect. So if you're gaming or whatever you're doing, there's always, every action you take has an effect. Every effect that you're perceiving has a cause. So like looking at your life and where it is now, using that law, you could say, okay, something, and if you want to believe what I mentioned earlier, that I am the creator of my reality, I'm not a victim to my circumstance. Using that law, you could look at your life and say, okay, everything right now is an effect. What have I been thinking, doing, not thinking that has led to this? And how can I change that if I want a different effect? And also, just even as an artist, it's like you want a different effect, you try something different, so the cause has to change. If it, and just to see the world with, I feel like that sort of, for me it's almost spatial in how I see it, but it's just a reminder that there's something here. If I want this thing in my life to change, how can I dig for the source? So that's one thing. And the other one I'll mention too is the law of polarity. Oh, there's another one I kind of want to bring in. But the law of polarity is, I've kind of hinted at it in some ways, like everything has, this glass of water has a top and a bottom.
Mm-hmm.
It has, from your perspective, it has a right side, and it has, on looking at it, and a left side. It's empty and it's full, with the water. So just one of the most basic ways using this in coaching or just in life in general is like, okay, there's a problem coming up. That means there has to be a solution. The problem couldn't exist. I couldn't perceive it as a problem if the solution didn't exist. And one of the things, like, even I learned this with this mentor that I was talking about, he would always wait for me to ask a question. Like, rarely would I get information without a question, because cause and effect, law of polarity. When I'm starting to be in a question, that means I'm more prepared for an answer. I'm ready to receive it. versus like all this information that might just come at me and I don't have the capacity for it yet. Even listening to this podcast,
Mm.
it's like some people may have had questions that are being they're answered here. Some stuff might just be going over a person's head if they're not in the place of receiving. So it's this all these, as a dancer, and maybe I don't know if you get this sense spatially, it's just like they all feel like there's an architecture to all of this and how everything interacts. So those are two. Um,
You said you wanted to bring a third one in.
Well, there is this law of perpetual transmutation, which I also love, which is that everything is moving like from non-form into form, back into non-form again. As with the work I've done in energy healing, I've seen that like healing is non-linear. The way the world works, even though we're conditioned to think it's linear, it's not. So if you put, if I really, let's say, because this is one of the episodes I listened of yours. It was on dating. And it was
Those are
like,
fun
oh, okay,
episodes.
like I want to date. Yeah, like people like those. Um, like I want to go on a date. Let's say I say that. Um, and maybe I want to go on a date with that person. And I ask that person, this is all hypothetical. I ask that person out for a date. And that person says no. And then if it's like, well, that doesn't matter because there's something in me that is shifting to want that. It may not come from that thing I've had my attention on, but I've been putting the energy out. It is going to come back. It's the same with generosity. There's these fundamental rules too. Like, if there's something that you want, give it to someone else. Money, love, it will come back. So that's the form into non-form. It's just there's something cyclical about how all of this is operating. Then there's the law of cause and effect is right inside of that too, right? Like I'm presenting a cause, there will be an effect. Okay, the date didn't happen. Let me refine my
Mhm.
cause. So that's kind of a jumble, but it's interesting, like I've learned these one by one, and then they do just become a way of thinking. They're automatic. My clients, I hear them repeat, okay, there's got to be a solution. I'm having this problem. Let's get to this. Can you help me? Like they know, so they're ready to receive the solution rather than just be stuck in the problem.
So the marquee or the headline or the main quote that I see on your website, it was really the first impression that I had gotten from it is to break through what's holding you back. I don't know if we've like formally or informally answered that question so far. I feel like there's a lot of stuff that we've talked about so far that ties into that. But if you had to distill it down, like what do you feel is actually this is gonna be two parts. So first part is what are the common issues that clients are coming to you with? What is the pattern that seems to be holding people back? And then part two is the complete opposite of like what has been like the most niche or like specific blockage that you've seen someone encounter.
Ooh, okay. I'm gonna hold all those questions. I want to reply to what helps a person break through. Um, I think it can often be, it's either like a point of pain or conflict. Something isn't happening in their lives that they want to happen, or an insight or a desire that just wants to come through. I mean, maybe they're not necessarily separate. For me personally, um, starting in my teens, I just wanted to keep dancing and I couldn't. So it led me to first get more information to be able to change my reality in an embodied way. So a lot of people come to me. Again, I work with a lot of creatives, and it has ranged from a person feeling like there's just a potential that they're not tapped into. Just as a being in general, it might be very much directly related to money because we see that as a correlation. And it is a correlation to very much, which all I would say, this is a response to another part of your question, boils down to worthiness. I think one of the problems that can happen in coaching, which I've also gone through, and it's been great, and it's also been something I've had to um, learn more deeply. Let me say what the problem is there's a lot of formulas. Do this, do this, do this, do this. And many coaches, this is an old paradigm, which I think we're shifting out of. It's like, just do it, just do it, just do it. And we can do that. I can do that. But something, my body, my health, my happiness is going to take a hit.
Mhm.
I really don't believe that's the way to do it. I feel like there's an alignment first where we come to know more deeply who we are, what we truly, truly want. And this is a long process. This is years. Again, this is something that could continue for a lifetime, but if we grow up being told having this kind of job, having this kind of relationship makes you successful, makes you a worthy being, is it really true? Is the deepest question. So people will come to me. For some people, I would say the underlying thing is related to what we've already spoken about, which is a person feels that they're not in their fullest expression. There's a potential that they haven't figured out how to bring into the world. It could be specifically related to their artistic career. It could be related to the business they're building. Um, it could be related to, one of my early clients. It was like, just didn't feel like he was performing at his highest in every realm of his life, and everything's all connected. So I think I tend to attract people who have a more creative brain, who really want to dive into the work of the heart. Because it just didn't work for me. When I was able to, yes, I was able to like hit major milestones as a business owner, income marks and all of that. And in the end, I would say this to my clients all the time, like if it's not built with integrity, it will fall
Mhm.
apart. If something is built on a lie, if a foundation is built on sand or whatever, it will fall apart. Great. Like let's let it fall apart so we can get to what's underneath it and not try to avoid that it will fall apart, because that is the compost of life. Like if we're not kind of falling apart on a regular basis, we're not living as fully as some part of us may want us to live.
Well, it's a, I wouldn't say this is true for pretty much every movie, but it is true for the majority of them, especially ones that are looking to have a conventional narrative in order to be satisfying to a commercial audience. Is that you always have to put the characters through some low points in order for them to rise up and get to the higher points. That's the essence of storytelling. That's the essence of emotional investment. Something that had lingered in my mind just as I was like processing what you had said about universal laws and cause and effect and law of polarity is something is not a problem until the solution is offered. And I just want to make sure I heard that right correctly. Like,
If a problem shows up, the solution is already there at the
right.
exact same time. Yeah.
So it made me flash back to a lot of the information that I learned when I was working with a marketing company, because I just pictured the scenario of someone shoveling their driveway, pretty backbreaking labor, but if this person didn't know about snow blowers, salt.
Mm,
It just this just acceptance. Oh, sure, there's pain, but there's always pain. My back hurts, whatever. But then this
mm.
person is watching television, and a commercial comes on and says, "Are you tired of the back pain? Are you tired of shoveling your driveway, taking hours? Here's the snow blower." And he goes, "Oh my God, my problems have been solved." But then the person gets the snow blower, and like, okay, now I have to work harder in order to afford it because this is expensive. I got to get fuel for it. This thing is full of its own set of problems, and does this person's life get better? I don't know. It was almost like more converting, or just trying to just decide where am I gonna be in pain and where am I gonna have more joy, because this person decides at the end of it, you know what? I will still go with a snowblower. Sure, I have to work a little bit harder at work to afford it, but gosh darn, my back feels better. So pick your poison.
Well, that's a mentality too, right? That there's always going to be, uh, I mean, yes, I'm saying this law of polarity, like there's always a shadow, but what are you focusing on? Like, because there can be so many different pieces embedded in what you said. There can be scarcity thinking about it's going to cost more money and I don't have the money
Mhm.
available. Is that true? Is that really true? Or is that something you heard people say? It's interesting. if you watch kids grow up, from like I've seen this in my family, it's like little ones and they're young adults now. It's like they turned into their parents, and it's like I know this because I've studied how the brain works. We're just running programs 95% of the day. So a person who wants to be in that vibration of there's always going to be a struggle, or maybe their value was built on struggle, they will find the next struggle. Like I got the snowblower. Oh shoot, now I need to make money. Oh, now I need to do this. No, you got the snowblower. Like it's easier. Guess what? You could also pay someone to snowblow it for you because there is a way if you want it and you believe it's possible that it can come in. And I think this is the thinking that stops us from being innovative in our own lives and innovative in this world in a bigger sense. Like I don't know if you can feel that. Like it's like, oh God, well then it's this and then it's this. Like I feel that in my body versus like, wait a second. Oh, like I can turn my head. I don't have to be locked into this thing that feels heavy in my chest and hurts my gut and my back hurts. Like, wait a second, there's something else. I don't know what it is, but I am going to be curious and available. I'm gonna just trust in that universal law. There's another way. There's something easier. And that was a big thing I learned from my coach too. It's like we place a value on life being hard.
Mm-hmm.
So guess what we'll get? If we want to be valued by this conditioned belief, we will make our lives hard.
I appreciate that. I realize that in the in the hypothetical that I had provided, there was a mix of like specific issues that are tied to it, but then holistically, it was about the mentality. It was about how this person continues to perceive things. Now, I just, for the record, I do physically shovel it because I like to get my exercise in, but that's just me sort of processing what you said and understanding that, like you had talked about earlier, is that going directly at the issue, in your case, it was the ankle. I mean, how could it not be the solution? That's the part that hurts. But no, it's about the holistic nature, about trying to understand what are all of the pathways that have that have come into a conflict with this, and how are we correcting all of those. So that's sort of me processing it. And then we are closing in on the last a little bit, and obviously I can't keep you forever, much to my regret. But the one takeaway that struck me very early on that had continued to be worked out in my subconscious, because I have some really good people in the back of my head that work very hard to help me out with this, is how dancing was distilled into movement, and that everything comes into movement. And that's sort of like the big takeaway that I want to start closing this episode out with, is that the best weeks that I have are the weeks where I'm on the move. Some of that obviously is exercising, but it's also just traveling, going to see people, having interactions, having, for instance, I don't know how this happened, but like two weeks ago, 2 birthdays, an anniversary with my partner, and then 2 other, or at least like 1 other occurrence that had prompted me to leave my house and go do something. So Monday, going to dinner, hanging out at a friend's apartment. They had a pool, nice place. Tuesday, good, different part of the city, different experience. Wednesday, different part of the experience. And what a great week. It's just all of this inertia that made Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday feel like 3 very different days, when the sort of the stereotypical 9 to 5 problem that these days have is that, well, Saturday and Sunday are special, then the rest of the week is a slog. Like, no, every day can have a unique identity to it. That's something that I work hard with on my literature too, is how to present how different days can have different meanings. But it came down to how, like, we can spend so much time sitting in our chairs, becoming sedentary, and now that, I think, can be one of the core disconnects with how we're losing our ability to connect with one another, because we're just losing our ability to stay connected in our own vessels. So my worst weeks are the weeks where I just feel like I'm just sitting, doing next to nothing day after day. And my best weeks really are the ones where, oh, again, I'm not dancing, but I'm moving. And I'm Italian too, right? So, the passion comes in, the hand talking comes out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how did this get distilled down to movement? It's funny because sometimes I would say to people, I think I'm more interested in movement than dancing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and movement essentially, it's like the physical experience takeaway that I had, was like, oh, there's a part of let me give an example, maybe not that's not mine, but a lot of times with students in a dance class, they won't breathe. They're nervous. They're trying to do it right. They're trying to do it right. That's a huge one. That teaching is huge. That's for another
Yeah.
conversation, because that stops us in so many different ways. But in this case, so they're like holding their breath. Maybe I'm going to work with them on something and they're nervous. And I just say, hey, you can breathe. Breath is movement. So then they're like, oh, and then they try the thing and it's so different. Like I'm from Illinois, grew up when Michael Jordan was at his prime, and it just like, just imagine if he tried to make that basketball shot with holding his breath. Like there's so much movement that needs to happen, so much coordination, movement of the mind, movement of the spirit, like energy, all of that to make that to create that shot, to create whatever it is. So that for me, it was like, oh, I'm injured, my back injury. Anger is an emotion that moves things. This is from traditional Chinese medicine. It's springtime energy. It's what sends a root out of the ground. It gives us clarity and boundaries, but it's a mover, right? So that was what was stuck in me that was creating this pain in my back. There was a direct correlation that my chiropractor at the time picked up on. So, and then for me, it was like, oh God, so I just had this sense that I started developing, when I started dancing when I was 4 or 5 years old, how it feels to move a kid, like how it feels to play
Mhm.
your comic drawing. Like there's also an embodied correlation to that, and whether or not you're conscious of it, you can develop your relationship to it. So, even with money, it was like I could sense like this part of my life, it's not in my body, but there's a correlation. It wasn't moving. I wanted to learn how to let that move because I know that we move, I said this earlier, until the day we die. That's when we stop moving. And the next thing happens. We stop moving in this physical body. So in essence, I always, our lives are made of movement. So if a person were to take this question of looking at where, if you can start to feel in your body what's stagnant, what's stuck right now. If that's not the entry point, maybe it's like what's really moving.
Mhm.
Pay attention to that because it will grow, it will spread, that vitality will spread. And you can look at it in your life too, even if you break it down into categories. How is relationship feeling? How are finances feeling? How is career feeling? How's home feeling? How are friendships feel? Which parts of those are moving or not? So it's metaphorical in the way that I say it, but I do believe there really is a physical correspondence that we can become even more subtly aware of. And when we start to do that, I also feel like we tap into our intuition on a different level too.
You'll be happy to know that this isn't the only time I get to hear this conversation because I get to review the material afterwards. And just because while recording, there's a lot of blinking lights, I sometimes I don't quite get to catch everything, or at least I don't get to absorb it at the level that I should. But not, that said, I definitely feel like even I've sort of understood things a little bit differently from the beginning of this episode until now. I did want to. It's going to be a little macabre, but because when you said that, when we die, we stop moving. But then I just thought, well, I mean, we stop thinking about moving, but when we die, nature gets to work, and the
Yes.
decomposition process begins. At which point, nature is now reclaiming our forms and is returning us to the earth. So movement is still in that aspect as well.
Yeah, totally. It's yeah, and I was thinking that too as soon as you said that it's this might be a little bit macabre, but it's true. I mean I do, in what I subscribe to, it's just what I subscribe to is like our spirit moves on, but the body, like our relationship to being in this body and being able to direct it with consciousness,
Mhm.
which we didn't really say that word that much, but that's been a huge part of my work as well. Like the consciousness that is driving everything leaves and then it returns back to the earth for sure.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that is beautiful movement.
Well, I appreciate everything that we've talked about, and I do have to start wrapping this conversation up. I'm going to the last question. This is a tradition of ours, just to get a feel for what challenges are you working on
Mm,
that your platform is facing on a day to day, and how do you see things being calibrated for you within maybe the next 4 to 5 years?
yeah, thank you for that question.
You're welcome.
Um, my challenge currently, I would say, is in doing less and in listening more deeply. Um, I don't even know if I want to call it a challenge because it's just something I'm being faced with. It doesn't even feel like my doing necessarily. It's just I just feel like the way that I'm interacting with my platform now is, I'll say it another way, is continuing to refine what do I really want to do and letting the rest go, like really letting it go. This morning I was talking with my assistant who's been with me for at least 6 years about just like what are our values? Simplicity is huge. Ease is huge. Serving is huge. And how can we make that as simple and easy as possible? And also satisfaction and pleasure. So I would say my challenge is I don't want to say I'm not in a moment like I've my work has been able to support me to have this freedom of exploration. And I feel in having this gift, I also want to help other people just distill down to what is the essence of this moment that I get to talk with you.
Mhm.
What is the essence of this lifetime, this year, whatever it is for a person? And I, again, it has a direct correlation to art, right? Like there's that drawing I was talking about that I was so excited to respond to that was just sitting on my counter. I was like, it's like, oh, I get to interact with it and feel like what its essence was. And sometimes I screw it up and there's no undo button, but
Mhm.
still here and I still get to try. So I would say that's what it is. And the practice of working on it is just being very, very honest with myself, with the people around me that I'm working with, that are working for me, with my close relationships, and with my own spirituality. I think the biggest thing is honesty. And when we can be with our honest truth, there's a great quote around about this, like being with your honest truth. And if you don't run away, like the growth will come. The growth it will be here. But as if we keep running away from our own truth, we're gonna get like kind of whipped back to
Mhm.
it, whether or not we resolve it in our lifetime. Again, it not everything can be resolved in one go. We're part of a larger continuum. So I don't know if that's concrete enough of an answer for you,
Well,
but that's
I'll share how it sort of worked out for me, and I'll try to do this quickly because, like I said, I gotta. We gotta get us all to move on
rabbit
with our
hole.
day. I worry that there's no polite way to say it. I gotta close the episode. Okay, so um, my friend had sent me this book from George Orwell about why I write. And in classic
Mhm.
George Orwell fashion, it was about like 2 pages worth of writing advice and then 20 pages about why England needs to go socialism or they're going to lose World War II. Classic Orwell. But what he said was among the reasons, one of them is just that joy of creation. And that resonated with me. And then on the other side, I was watching this online content creator whose work I really respect called The Critical Drinker, who's very good at going after what he feels are the problems with modern Hollywood. And he talked about how the final season of Game of Thrones was not well received by the audience because the book wasn't done and because the writer didn't finish it. And so the showrunners had to essentially improvise with very little guide to work with. And as talented as the creator is, he's one of the all-time best writers, certainly one of the best writers living. He's not gonna get any better as time will eventually claim him. So there was that fear on the other side of, okay, I don't have forever to do this. This is something that I do have to actually put some work and some effort into. So in the center of light and shadow was my answer. if I came from a place of fear and I came from a place of joy, and I got the same result. So I think there's something about a willingness to explore both the light and the shadow that helped me find that balance in the center.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're meant to be in all of it. Like again, there's no value. And I think one of the biggest things that I feel like contributed to my success as a dancer and I feel like the impact of the work I get to do with my clients is we got to embrace it all.
Mm-hmm.
It's wholeness, and then from there we can consciously choose. It's like someone said this to me, and I think it's so great. Like you can't say yes until you can say no. Like, and if you can truly say no to this, then you can say yes to it. So there's law of polarity at
Mm-hmm.
work again too.
So I am going to formally wrap this conversation up, but I've enjoyed it so immensely that I certainly wish that we could go on for another 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. So thank you for your time. Thank you for this exchange of ideas and energy. It does mean a lot to me personally. If you did have any closing thoughts that you wanted to share as a result of this conversation, you're free to do so. Otherwise, let the audience know where they can find you online if they want to reach out and maybe have a chat.
Yeah, I want to say thank you for creating this possibility and for anyone who's listening and all the people you're serving through this. Just thank you for that. Um, I'll say my closing, well, yeah, I'll say my closing thought first, which I think is just in this journey. I know this from experience, like having had perfectionist tendencies, and again, this wanting to do it right and wanting to go deep. It's just be compassionate, and when we're compassionate with ourselves, we're compassionate with the rest of the world. If we're not compassionate with the world, then there's some part of ourselves that we're not being compassionate with. So again, this it's just like love is all there is. As cheesy as it sounds, it's like, oh man, there's maybe a reason those things stick around. So that is the heart of my work and the heart, I believe, of really wonderful creation. So that would be my closing thought. And if people want to follow my work, go to my website, michelleboulé.com. We have an opt-in there so you can be on my newsletter list. And then I feel like I'm probably most active on Instagram, and it's at michelle.boulé.
Okay.
And I imagine put those handles in and whatnot for people to go and follow. Send me a message if you want, and
Yeah,
we
we
can.
always link to the website. Yeah, we always make sure to do that. All right, everybody. Well, this has been another insightful and impactful episode of, you guessed it, the Impactful Coaching Podcast. What else can I say that I haven't said already? It's great to be able to do this, and it's great to be able to serve all of you as a conveyor of messages. So if there is anything that you have in the mind, it is Joseph at impactfulcoachingpodcast.com. Joseph is spelled Joseph. The rest of it is spelled the way you're used to. And it is our endeavor to ensure in whatever way you are helping others, we want you to be impactful while you're at it.